About the Applied Linguistics Group and its author. Applied Linguistics Group uploaded this video. This group is for helping students of BS, MS, MPhil, and PhD in English Linguistics, Applied Linguistics TEFL, and TESOL. Also, for the students of English Literature. This group also helps TOEFL and IELTS students with video guides. Dr. Khalid Malik is the founder of Applied Linguistics Group's https://youtube.com/@1966 Pakistani. Dr. Khalid Malik has a PhD in Applied Linguistics TESOL. He published more than 25 research papers. He taught a lot of foreign universities with vast English teaching experience. Now, at present, he is teaching in a foreign university and also at the same time admitted to a postdoctoral study project in another foreign university on the topic of language variations. Interested students in BS, MS, MPhil, or PhD in English Linguistics, Applied Linguistics, TESOL, IELTS, or English Literature students can join his YouTube Applied Linguistics group for a free education guide. Help others easily find Applied Linguistics group by copying or downloading a QR code. Anyone who scans the QR code will see the group's About page and can ask to join. Error Analysis Linguistics. In linguistics, according to J. Richard et al., 2002, an error is the use of a word, speech act or grammatical items in such a way that it seems imperfect and significant of an incomplete learning. 184. It is considered by Norrish, 1983, p. 7, as a systematic deviation which happens when a learner has not learned something, and consistently gets it wrong. However, the attempts made to put the error into context have always gone hand in hand with either language learning and second language acquisition process. Hendrickson, 1987:357, mentioned that errors are signals that indicate an actual learning process taking place and that the learner has not yet mastered or shown a well-structured, linguistic competence, in the target language. All the definitions seem to stress either on the systematic deviations triggered in the language learning process, or its indications of the actual situation of the language learner themselves, which will later help monitoring, be it an applied linguist or particularly the language teacher, to solve the problem, respecting one of the approaches argued in the error analysis, ANIF-NAF 2017. The occurrence of errors doesn't only indicate that the learner has not learned something yet, but also it gives the linguist the idea of whether the teaching method applied was effective or it needs to be changed. According to Corder, 1976, errors signify three things. First, to the teacher, in that the learner tells the teacher, if they have undertaken a systematic analysis, how far towards that goal the learner has progressed and, consequently, what remains for them to learn. Second, they provide the researcher with evidence of how language is learned or acquired, and what strategies or procedures the learner is employing in their discovery of the language. Third, and in a sense this is their most important aspect, they are indispensable to the learner himself/herself, because the making of errors can be regarded as a device the learner uses in order to learn. p. 167. The occurrence of errors is merely a sign of the present inadequacy of our teaching methods. Corder 1976, p. 163. There have been two schools of thought when it comes to error analysis and philosophy. The first one, according to Corder, 1967, linked the error commitment with the teaching method, arguing that if the teaching method was adequate, the errors would not be committed. The second, believed that we live in an imperfect world and that error correction is something real and the applied linguist cannot do without it no matter what teaching approach they may use. Errors versus mistakes. Chomsky, 1965, made a distinguishing explanation of competence and performance on which, later on, the identification of mistakes and errors will be possible. Chomsky stated that we thus make a fundamental distinction between competence, the speaker hearer's knowledge of his language, and performance, the actual use of language in concrete situations. 1956, p. 4. In other words, errors are thought of as indications of an incomplete learning, and that the speaker or hearer has not yet accumulated a satisfied language knowledge which can enable them to avoid linguistics misuse. Relating knowledge with competence was significant enough to represent that the competence of the speaker is judged by means of errors that concern the amount of linguistic data they have been exposed to. However, performance, which is the actual use of language, does not represent the language knowledge that the speaker has. According to J. Richard et al., 2002, people may have the competence to produce an infinitely long sentence, but when they actually attempt to use this knowledge to perform, there are many reasons why they restrict the number of adjectives, adverbs, and clauses in any one sentence. 2002, 392. The actual state of the speaker somehow involves and influences the speaker's performance by either causing a good performance or mistakes. Thus, it is quite obvious that there is some kind of interrelationship between competence and performance. Somehow, a speaker can perform well if they have had already satisfied linguistic knowledge. As a support to this, Corder, 1967, mentioned that mistakes are of no significance to the process of language learning. P. 167. Error analysis approach. Before the rise of error analysis approach, contrastive analysis had been the dominant approach used in dealing and conceptualizing the learner's errors in the 1950s. This approach had often gone hand in hand with concept of L1 interference and precisely the interlingual effect. Anif Nafz 2017. It claimed that the main cause of committing errors in the process of second language learning is the L1, in other words, the linguistic background of the language learners badly affects the production in the target language or second language. Xfang and Jake Sumai, 2007, pointed out that contrastive analysis hypothesis claimed that the principal barrier to second language acquisition is the interference of the first language system with the second language system, and that a scientific, structural comparison of the two languages in question would enable people to predict and describe which are problems and which are not. Error analysis approach overwhelmed and announced the decline of the contrastive analysis, which was only effective in phonology, and, according to J. Richard et al., 2002, EA developed as a branch of linguistics in the 1960s, and it came to light to argue that the mother tongue was not the main and the only source of the errors committed by the learners. In addition, Hashim, 1999, mentioned that the language effect is more complex and these errors can be caused even by the target language itself and by the applied communicative strategies as well as the type and quality of the second language instructions. The aim of EA, according to J. Richard et al., 2002, is, first, to identify strategies which learners use in language learning, in terms of the approaches and strategies used in both of teaching and learning. Second, to try to identify the causes of learners' errors, that is, investigating the motives behind committing such errors as the first attempt to eradicate them. Third, to obtain information on common difficulties in language learning, as an aid to teaching or in the preparation of the teaching materials. The two major causes of error, coined by the error analysis approach, are the interlingual error, which is an error made by the learner's linguistic background and native language interference, and the intralingual error, which is the error committed by the learners when they misuse some target language rules, considering that the error cause lies within and between the target language itself and the learner's false application of certain target language rules. Error analysis in SLA was established in the 1960s by Corder and colleagues. 1. Error analysis, EA, was an alternative to contrastive analysis, an approach influenced by behaviorism through which applied linguists sought to use the formal distinctions between the learner's first and second languages to predict errors. Error analysis showed that contrastive analysis was unable to predict a great majority of errors, although its more valuable aspects have been incorporated into the study of language transfer. A key finding of error analysis has been that many learner errors are produced by learners making faulty inferences about the rules of the new language. Error analysts distinguish between errors, which are systematic, and mistakes, which are not. They often seek to develop a typology of errors. Error can be classified according to basic type, omissive, additive, substitutive, or related to word order. They can be classified by how apparent they are. Overt errors such as "I angry" are obvious even out of context, whereas covert errors are evident only in context. Closely related to this is the classification according to domain, the breadth of context which the analyst must examine, and extent, the breadth of the utterance which must be changed in order to fix the error. Errors may also be classified according to the level of language: phonological errors, vocabulary or lexical errors, syntactic errors, and so on. They may be assessed according to the degree to which they interfere with communication. Global errors make an utterance difficult to understand, while local errors do not. In the above example, "I angry" would be a local error, since the meaning is apparent. From the beginning, error analysis was beset with methodological problems. In particular, the above typologies are problematic. From linguistic data alone, it is often impossible to reliably determine what kind of error a learner is making. Also, error analysis can deal effectively only with learner production, speaking and writing, and not with learner reception, listening and reading. Furthermore, it cannot account for learner use of communicative strategies such as avoidance, in which learners simply do not use a form with which they are uncomfortable. For these reasons, although error analysis is still used to investigate specific questions in SLA, the quest for an overarching theory of learner errors has largely been abandoned. In the mid-1970s, Corder and others moved on to a more wide-ranging approach to learner language, known as interlineage. Error analysis is closely related to the study of error treatment in language teaching. Today, the study of errors is particularly relevant for focus on form teaching methodology. In second language acquisition, error analysis studies the types and causes of language errors. Errors are classified, too, according to modality, i.e., level of proficiency in speaking, writing, reading, listening. Linguistic levels, i.e., pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, style. Form, for example, omission, insertion, substitution. Type, systematic errors / errors in competence versus occasional errors / errors in performance. Cause, for example, interference, interlineage. Norm versus system. Types of errors. Linguists have always been attempting to describe the types of errors committed by the language learners, and that is exactly the best way to start with, as it helps out the applied linguist to identify where the problem lies. According to Goulet et al., 1982, errors take place when the learner changes the surface structure in a particularly systematic manner, p. 150, thus, the error, no matter what form and type it is, represent a damage at the level of the target language production. Errors have been classified by J. Richard et al., 2002, into two categories. The interlingual error and the intralingual error. Those two elements refer respectively to the negative influence of both the speaker's native language and the target language itself. Interlingual error is caused by the interference of the native language L1, also known as interference, linguistic interference, and cross-linguistic influence, whereby the learner tends to use their linguistic knowledge of L1 on some linguistic features in the target language. However, it often leads to making errors. The example, provided by J. Richard et al., 2002, the incorrect French sentence "Elle regarde les, she sees them," produced according to the word order of English, instead of the correct French sentence "Elle les regarde," literally, she them sees. p. 267, shows the type of errors aroused by the negative effect of the native language interference. Intralingual error is an error that takes place due to a particular misuse of a particular rule of the target language. It is, in fact, quite the opposite of interlingual error. It puts the target language into focus. The target language in this perspective is thought of as an error cause. Furthermore, J. Richard et al., 2002, consider it as one which results from faulty or partial learning of the target language. p. 267. Thus the intralingual error is classified as follow. Overgeneralizations. In linguistics, Overgeneralizations error occur when the speaker applies a grammatical rule in cases where it doesn't apply. Richard et al., 2002, mentioned that they are caused by extension of target language rules to inappropriate context, p.185. This kind of errors have been committed while dealing with regular and irregular verbs, as well as the application of plural forms. For example, tooth equals tooths rather than teeth, and he goes equals he goat rather than went. Simplifications. They result from learners producing simpler linguistic forms than those found in the target language. In other words, learners attempt to be linguistically creative and produce their own poetic sentences / utterances. They may actually be successful in doing it, but it is not necessarily the case. Corder, as cited in Mahmood 2014:276, mentioned that learners do not have the complex system which they could simplify. This kind of errors is committed through both of omission and addition of some linguistic elements at the level of either the spelling or grammar. Mahmood, 2014, provided examples based on a research conducted on written English of Arabic-speaking second-year university students. Spelling, omission of silent letters. No, equals no, asterisk doubt, equals doubt, asterisk white, wait. Grammar. Omission. We wait carried the bus all the time. He was carried clever and has carried understanding father. Addition. Students are do their researches every semester. Both the boys and the girls they can study together. Developmental errors. This kind of errors is somehow part of the overgeneralizations. This later is subtitled into natural and developmental learning stage errors. D.E. are results of normal pattern of development, such as come equals comed, and break equals braked. D.E. indicates that the learner has started developing their linguistic knowledge and fail to reproduce the rules they have lately been exposed to in target language learning. Induced errors, as known as transfer of training, errors caused by misleading teaching examples. Teachers, sometimes, unconditionally, explain a rule without highlighting the exceptions or the intended message they would want to convey. J. Richard et al., 2002, provided an example that occurs at the level of teaching prepositions and particularly at where the teacher may hold up a box and say I am looking at the box. The students may understand that at means under. They may later utter the cat is at the table instead of the cat is under the table. Errors of avoidance. These errors occur when the learner fails to apply certain target language rules just because they are thought of to be too difficult. Errors of overproduction. In the early stages of language learning, learners are supposed to have not yet acquired and accumulated a satisfied linguistic knowledge which can enable them to use the finite rules of the target language in order to produce infinite structures. Most of the time, beginners overproduce. In such a way, they frequently repeat a particular structure. Steps. According to linguist Corder, the following are the steps in any typical EA research. 3. Collecting samples of learner language. Identifying the errors. Describing the errors. Explaining the errors. Evaluating / correcting the errors. Collection of errors. The nature and quantity of errors is likely to vary depending on whether the data consist of natural, spontaneous language use or careful, elicited language use. Corder, 1973, distinguished two kinds of elicitation: clinical and experimental elicitation. Clinical elicitation involves getting the informant to produce data of any sort, for example by means of general interview or writing a composition. Experimental elicitation involves the use of special instrument to elicit data containing the linguistic features such as a series of pictures which had been designed to elicit specific features. About the Applied Linguistics Group and its author. Applied Linguistics Group uploaded this video. This group is for helping students of BS, MS, MPhil, and PhD in English Linguistics, Applied Linguistics TEFL, and TESOL. Also, for the students of English literature. This group also helps TOEFL and IELTS students with video guides. Dr. Khalid Malik is the founder of Applied Linguistics Groups https://youtube.com/@1966 Pakistani. Dr. Khalid Malik has a PhD in Applied Linguistics to Seoul. He published more than 25 research papers. He taught a lot of foreign universities with vast English teaching experience. Now, at present, he is teaching in a foreign university and also at the same time admitted to a postdoctoral study project in another foreign university on the topic of language variations. Interested students in BS, MS, MPhil, or PhD in English linguistics, applied linguistics, TESOL, ELT, or English literature students can join his YouTube Applied Linguistics group for a free education guide. Help others easily find Applied Linguistics group by copying or downloading a QR code. Anyone who scans the QR code will see the group's About page and can ask to join.